Dominic Carrington lived a life that most could only dream of. At 40, he had built an empire from the ground up, businesses, investments, and properties spanning the globe. He was a self-made billionaire, a man who was known for his sharp mind and unrelenting drive. But it wasn't just his wealth that made him stand out. It was the image he had carefully curated, the perfect life he led with his wife, Isabella. Isabella Carrington was everything Dominic had ever wanted. Beautiful, intelligent, and sophisticated, she complimented him in ways he couldn't have imagined. Their marriage was the pinnacle of elegance and success, often splashed across society pages and magazine covers. She was his rock, his confidant, and the woman who had stood by his side through every victory and setback. To Dominic, their union felt invincible, a partnership that had weathered challenges without ever showing signs of strain. Their home was a sprawling mansion in the hills, a breathtaking combination of modern architecture and timeless luxury. Every inch of the estate spoke to their wealth and taste. From the grand foyer adorned with priceless art to the sprawling gardens that overlooked the city below. Guests marveled at the grandeur of their lives, attending lavish parties where champagne flowed freely and laughter echoed through the hallways. Dominic and Isabella played their parts effortlessly, smiling, charming, and presenting an image of happiness that never seemed to falter. Isabella was everything Dominic had ever imagined a wife to be. She was graceful in every interaction, always composed, her beauty captivating in its subtlety. They attended charity galas, made joint appearances at high-profile events, and ran their household like an empire. People spoke of them as the perfect couple. Their love seemed as flawless as the life they led. And to Dominic, this perfection was something he valued above all else. He was proud of what they had built together. Isabella was supportive of his business ventures, and they often made decisions together, creating a sense of unity that he thought was unshakable. But beneath the surface, small cracks began to form, though Dominic never saw them. There were moments when Isabella's gaze would drift to the horizon during quiet dinners, a look of melancholy passing over her features before she quickly masked it with a smile. He noticed it but chalked it up to her being tired or lost in thought. She had her own responsibilities, after all, her charity work, managing their shared businesses, and being the perfect wife. In his mind, they were a team, working side by side toward mutual success. He never questioned her commitment, never suspected that there could be anything hidden from him. Lily, their daughter, was the center of their world. Dominic loved her fiercely, though he often found himself caught up in the whirlwind of work, traveling, and managing his empire. Isabella, ever the doting mother, took the lead in raising Lily. She was everything a mother could be, loving, nurturing, and ever-present in their daughter's life. Lily was an exuberant child, full of curiosity and joy, with Isabella's delicate features and Dominic's sharp eyes. They both adored her, and Dominic couldn't have asked for a more perfect family. In his eyes, they had everything: success, wealth, and a life filled with love. Even their social circle reflected their ideal existence. They were constantly surrounded by friends, colleagues, and other influential people who admired and respected them. To the outside world, Dominic and Isabella were the epitome of modern-day royalty. They were always together, attending events, hosting dinners, and keeping up appearances. Their friends envied their lifestyle, their business savvy, and above all, their flawless marriage. Dominic rarely had time for much else. He believed in his work and his family, and that was enough. As the years passed, Dominic began to feel a subtle, growing pressure, not from the external world, but from within himself. Though he had achieved everything he had ever set out to do, something felt off. He couldn't quite place it, but it gnawed at him from time to time. He'd often find himself staring out of his office window, watching the busy world below, wondering if there was more to life than the constant cycle of business meetings, press events, and the pursuit of even more wealth. Still, he never voiced these thoughts. He was too entrenched in the life they had built, too proud of the family he had created. He pushed the feeling aside, convinced it was just the weight of his success pressing on him. But there were moments, fleeting and easy to ignore, when he'd catch Isabella looking away from him during quiet moments, as though lost in a thought she wasn't ready to share. Sometimes, after a busy week, they'd sit together for dinner, and he'd sense a distance between them, one that wasn't there before. It was subtle, something he could never fully articulate. He attributed it to the demands of their lives, the constant motion that came with being in the public eye. Dominic never thought of questioning their life together. He simply couldn't imagine a scenario where anything could disrupt the seamless world they had created. His love for Isabella was unwavering, and his trust in her was absolute. He believed that nothing, not even the darkest secrets, could threaten the life they shared. And for a long time, this belief served as the foundation of their marriage. But what Dominic didn't know, what he couldn't have fathomed, was that a storm was brewing beneath the surface of their perfect existence. A storm that in an instant would shatter everything he thought he knew about the woman he loved, the life they built, and the future he had planned. Before moving forward, do not forget to subscribe and share. Now, coming back, Dominic's day started like any other. A morning run on the estate grounds, a meticulously prepared breakfast, and a quick exchange of plans with Isabella before they went their separate ways for the day. She had errands to run and meetings for her charity work, while he had a stack of business proposals waiting on his desk. Life was a rhythm they had perfected, a routine that felt effortless. But that sense of normalcy was about to crumble in a way Dominic could never have anticipated. It began with something small, a forgotten detail that most would have overlooked. Dominic was in search of an important document for a property deal. Isabella's office desk, usually pristine, had a small stack of papers that seemed out of place. He wasn't the type to rifle through her belongings, but in his mind, they shared everything. There was no harm in taking a quick look. As he sifted through the papers, his fingers brushed against something thicker than the rest. A letter, yellowed slightly at the edges, tucked between folders. Curiosity compelled him to open it. At first glance, the letter appeared formal, stamped with the logo of a law firm he didn't recognize. He skimmed the words, expecting it to be related to her charity work, but as the sentences unfolded, his heart began to pound. The letter referred to a legal guardian arrangement and mentioned a child, Lily. His Lily. It was addressed to Isabella, discussing matters he'd never heard about: custody, arrangements, and an unnamed individual who was somehow involved in these decisions. The room seemed to shrink around him. Questions swirled in his mind, each one more confusing than the last. Why was Isabella involved in legal discussions about Lily's guardianship? Why hadn't he ever seen this letter before? The unease he had brushed off in fleeting moments suddenly surged to the forefront, turning into a gnawing dread. He couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't a mistake, that this wasn't something innocuous. Dominic didn't wait for Isabella to return home. He called her, voice steady but with an edge that betrayed his growing anger. She answered on the third ring, her tone light and unsuspecting. "What's wrong?" she asked casually. He could hear the hum of her car in the background, the soft click of her turning down the volume on the radio. "Come home," he said firmly. "Now, we need to talk." The brief silence on the other end felt heavier than it should have. "Is everything okay?" she finally asked, her voice tinged with concern. "Just get here," Dominic replied, hanging up before she could press further. When she arrived, the tension in the air was palpable. Isabella stepped into the study, her eyes searching Dominic's face for clues. He was holding the letter, the paper slightly crumpled in his grip. Without a word, he handed it to her. She glanced at it, her face shifting from confusion to a tight, controlled expression he had never seen before. "Where did you find this?" she asked softly, her tone carefully measured. "Why does that matter?" Dominic shot back. "What I want to know is why I've never seen this before. What does this mean, Isabella? What are you hiding from me?" Her eyes darted to the letter, then back to him. For a moment, she looked like she might try to deflect, to come up with a quick explanation to smooth things over. But then, she exhaled deeply, her shoulders slumping under the weight of whatever she was about to say. "There's something I need to tell you," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "Something I should have told you a long time ago." Dominic's stomach tightened. He could feel the foundation of his world trembling beneath him. "Then tell me," he urged, his voice sharper than he intended. No more excuses, no more hiding. Tell me everything. Isabella hesitated, her hands trembling slightly as she placed the letter on the desk. Lily isn't yours, she said, the words falling like stones between them. She's my daughter, but not biologically yours. I had her before we met. The room fell silent. Dominic stared at her, waiting for the punchline, for her to laugh and say it was all some misunderstanding. But her expression was somber, her eyes brimming with a mixture of regret and fear. You lied to me, he finally said, his voice breaking with disbelief. You've been lying to me for 10 years, Isabella. Why? Why would you do this? She stepped closer, desperation in her voice. I didn't know how to tell you. When we met, my life was complicated. My family was involved in things you can't imagine. And Lily, she wasn't supposed to be part of this life. I thought I could protect her. I thought I could protect you. Protect me? Dominic barked out a bitter laugh. From what? From the truth? You built our entire life on a lie. Isabella. Her face crumpled, tears slipping down her cheeks. I didn't want to lose you, she said, her voice trembling. I was scared. You have to believe me, Dominic. Everything I did because I love you. Dominic turned away, unable to look at her. The words she had spoken felt like daggers, each one cutting deeper into the life he thought he knew. He had built his world on trust, on the belief that he and Isabella were a team. Now, that trust was shattered, and the pieces of his life lay scattered around him, impossible to put back together. Isabella's voice trembled as she spoke, each word weighed down with a heaviness Dominic hadn't known existed. The truth that had been buried for so long was now rising to the surface, and the reality of it was like a blow to his chest. The perfect life he'd carefully constructed, the marriage that had seemed unshakable, was beginning to crumble with every passing second. I didn't want to hurt you, she said softly, the words laced with a raw sincerity that only deepened his confusion. She wiped her eyes, her hands shaking, and took a few steps closer to him, her voice softening as if she were trying to comfort him even in the midst of the storm she had unleashed. You have to understand, Dominic. I was trying to protect our family, protect you. He didn't respond immediately, still grappling with the magnitude of her confession. He could hardly process what she was saying. Lily wasn't his. Lily wasn't his. How had he missed this? How had he spent years building a life around a lie so big that it now threatened to swallow him whole? I don't understand, he said, his voice hoarse with disbelief. How could you hide something like this from me for so long? We've been together for over a decade, Isabella. You never once mentioned a child before Lily, before us. How could you keep something so massive a secret? Isabella's face fell. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't know how to fit it into the life we were building together. I was already so deep into this, into us, that I thought if I kept it buried, I could keep it from ever threatening what we had. Her words hung in the air, but Dominic couldn't make sense of them. He felt betrayed, humiliated, as though his entire life had been a facade. He had prided himself on being sharp, a man who saw through every lie and every illusion. How had he missed this? How had he never suspected that something was amiss with Lily, with Isabella? You talk about protecting me, but all I feel is betrayed, Isabella, he said, his voice cracking with the weight of his anger. I spent all this time thinking everything we had was real, thinking that Lily, our family, was real. And now you're telling me it's all been a lie. That Lily isn't even mine. She took a step forward, her face crumpling with regret. No, it's not like that. It's just complicated. I never meant for it to get this far. Lily was never meant to be a part of this life, Dominic. She was supposed to stay out of it. But after we got married, after we had everything, it became impossible to tell you the truth without risking everything we had. Dominic clenched his fists, feeling the anger building, the sense of betrayal threatening to overwhelm him. He had always been so sure of Isabella, of their life together. Now, it felt like every foundation was cracking beneath him. He tried to steady his breathing, trying to gain control of his emotions, but it was as if they had no place to go. His mind was a whirlwind of questions, of images of Isabella that now felt hollow, empty of the trust he once had. Who's the father, Isabella? The words came out before he could stop them, cold and cutting. He needed answers, needed to know how this had happened, how his world had been shattered without him even knowing. Her face paled, and she bit her lip. "He's not in the picture anymore," she said quietly, avoiding his gaze. "It was a brief affair, a mistake that I regretted. But the moment I found out I was pregnant, everything changed. I couldn't do it alone. I couldn't raise a child in the environment I was in, so I left. I left everything behind." Dominic stood frozen, his thoughts scrambling. He knew Isabella had come from a troubled family, from a background of secrets and manipulation. But he hadn't realized how deeply that past had been woven into their present. "So, you left everything, your past, your child's father, behind. And then, what? You just started over with me?" "Yes," she whispered. "I had to. I wanted a better life for us, for Lily. And when we met, when we fell in love, I knew this was my chance to finally build a future, one without the chaos of my past. But I didn't know how to tell you. I was terrified of losing you, of you rejecting me, rejecting her. So I buried it. I thought if I kept it all hidden, we could have the perfect life." The silence that followed was suffocating. Dominic's mind raced, trying to process the truth, trying to reconcile the woman standing before him with the life he had believed they shared. Everything felt tainted now. The love they had built, the family he thought he knew. Was it all just a beautiful lie? "What do you expect me to do with this, Isabella?" Dominic finally said, his voice low, strained with frustration. "You've built this entire life, this perfect little family, on a foundation of secrets. You've kept me in the dark about something as important as Lily's parentage. And now, you expect me to just accept it?" Isabella's eyes filled with tears, and she reached out to him, but Dominic stepped back, not ready for her touch, not yet. "I never wanted this to happen," she said, her voice breaking. "I never wanted to hurt you, Dominic. But I couldn't see another way out. I thought if I just kept lying, if I just kept pretending, I could protect everything." Dominic stared at her, the pain of her words cutting deeper than anything else. He could feel the anger rising again, hot and visceral. But there was something else there too, something more insidious. Betrayal. The sharp realization that he had been living in a house of mirrors, where everything reflected an illusion. His wife, his daughter, his perfect life, it had all been built on a lie. "I don't know who you are anymore," he said quietly, his voice barely audible. "I don't know if I can trust you. I don't know if I can ever look at you the same way again." Isabella crumpled, her shoulders shaking as she let out a breathless sob. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." But Dominic wasn't listening anymore. The world he had known was slipping through his fingers, and no apology could fix it. The hours after Isabella's confession felt like a blur, a strange, disorienting mix of numbness and raw emotion. Dominic sat in the study long after she had left, the weight of the truth pressing down on him like a leaden blanket. He tried to focus, to think logically, but the questions kept swirling in his mind, faster than he could process. Why had Isabella kept this from him for so long? Who was Lily's father? And more importantly, what else had she been hiding? The nights stretched on, and Dominic could hardly bring himself to sleep. He kept replaying Isabella's words in his head, each detail digging deeper into his conscience. She hadn't just lied about Lily's paternity. She concealed an entire chapter of her life. What other secrets could there be? What else had she buried to keep their world perfect? By the time morning came, he knew he couldn't let this go. He needed answers. It wasn't just about the betrayal. It was about the layers of deception he had never seen, the world he had assumed he understood that had crumbled overnight. Dominic's first instinct was to speak to Isabella again, to confront her with every question that was gnawing at him. But there was something in her eyes, a mixture of guilt and fear, that made him hesitate. He wasn't sure he could trust her anymore, not with the truth, not with anything. No, this time he needed to dig deeper on his own. If Isabella had hidden this much, there was no telling what else she had buried beneath the surface. The investigation began with a call to his lawyer. Dominic had always prided himself on knowing how to get things done, how to pull strings when necessary, how to leverage resources. And now, with everything in his life on the line, He was determined to leave no stone unturned. He met with his lawyer in the afternoon, sitting in the sterile conference room, the sound of his own thoughts louder than anything his lawyer had to say. Dominic relayed what he knew, the letter, the secret guardianship, and the lawyer immediately jumped into action. They began pulling every possible document, every record they could find related to Lily's birth, Isabella's past, and any other legal ties she may have been involved with over the years. "I need to know everything about her, about Lily," Dominic said firmly, his voice colder now than he had ever heard it before. "This isn't just about Lily's father. It's about who Isabella really is. She's been hiding things from me for too long. It ends now." The lawyer nodded, making notes on his tablet. "We'll look into it. Birth certificates, adoption records, anything related to Lily. We can also check public records, anything that could connect her to this mystery father." After the meeting, Dominic found himself back in his own office, staring at his reflection in the glass window overlooking the city. The view was usually something he'd found calming, but now it felt like an illusion, another reminder of the life he had once thought was perfect. There was no peace here anymore, not until he found the truth. He didn't trust Isabella to tell him everything, and something told him she wouldn't. She had hidden too much already, too many layers of the past carefully guarded and locked away. No, the truth was buried deep, and Dominic was going to find it himself. He began by reaching out to anyone who might have known her before they'd met. Old friends, former colleagues, even distant relatives. Anyone who might have information about the woman she had been before their lives had become intertwined. It was one of her childhood friends who finally gave him something substantial. Over the phone, the woman hesitated at first, unsure of how much she could reveal. But Dominic's persistence eventually broke through. He mentioned Lily, and suddenly, the woman's tone shifted, wariness giving way to a quiet confession. "She's always been private," the woman said, her voice low. "But I'm not surprised that you're finding this out now. Isabella, she's not the person you think she is, Dominic. She's been hiding things for years. I don't know about Lily's father, but I do know there's a lot she never told you. A lot she's kept buried." Dominic's pulse quickened. "What else?" he demanded, unwilling to let the conversation slip away. The woman took a deep breath. "I think you should talk to her old family lawyer," she said, her voice suddenly urgent. "He knows more than anyone. Isabella had to deal with a lot before she met you, and some of that could be connected to Lily." Dominic hung up the phone with a sense of growing urgency. He wasn't about to let this lead slip away. The pieces were starting to fall into place, but they were still scattered. He had no idea how they fit together yet. But the mention of a family lawyer, someone who had been close to Isabella before their marriage, could be the key to unlocking the rest of the mystery. He arranged a meeting with the lawyer that evening. The man was older, silver-haired, and thin, with a sharp look in his eye that suggested he had been in the business of secrets for a long time. Dominic didn't waste time on pleasantries. He went straight to the heart of the matter, asking about Isabella's past, about her connection to Lily, and about any legal dealings that might have been kept from him. The lawyer leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled in front of his mouth. "Isabella has always been very careful," he said slowly. "Her family has a history of complications. She didn't want anyone to know about Lily. Not her family, not anyone. But there were certain things that had to be done to ensure the child's safety. To protect her from what?" Dominic's voice was sharp, his patience wearing thin. Why all the secrecy? What was so dangerous about this child that it couldn't be known? The lawyer hesitated, clearly weighing his words. Finally, he spoke, his voice lower now, almost as though he were letting Dominic in on something he wasn't supposed to know. Isabella was involved with a man. He wasn't just anyone. He was dangerous, violent, even, and the decision to keep Lily out of the picture wasn't just hers. It was made for her. It was made by people who knew what this man was capable of, and she had to disappear. They had to disappear. But I don't know what else you've been told. I never got involved in the family business much after that. Dominic sat in stunned silence. The pieces that had seemed so disconnected were starting to take form, but it was worse than he could have ever imagined. Isabella had hidden more than just Lily's paternity. She had kept the entire truth about her past, about the people who could have destroyed everything from him. The investigation had just begun, and the more Dominic uncovered, the more he realized how deep this went and how much danger they were truly in. Before moving forward, do not forget to subscribe and share. Now coming back, Dominic barely slept that night, his mind a storm of confusion and anger. He couldn't escape the images flashing in his head. The child he had raised as his own, the woman he had loved for over a decade, and the web of secrets that seemed to entangle them all. The truth had broken his world, but even as the pieces fell, there was a part of him that still clung to some shred of hope. Maybe, just maybe, there was an explanation for all of this. Maybe Isabella hadn't betrayed him completely. But as the sun began to set the next day, something far more unexpected came to light. It wasn't just Isabella's past that was about to be uncovered. It was Lily's. Dominic had arranged to meet with Isabella again, hoping for some semblance of clarity. He needed answers, and he wasn't going to get them from anyone but her. But before he could even leave his office, his phone buzzed on the desk, and the name on the screen made his heart skip a beat. Lily. He stared at the phone for a long moment, his fingers hovering over the screen. He had never expected a call from her, not like this. It was early evening, and Lily had never been one to reach out first, especially not with everything that had happened. He hesitated before answering, unsure of what he would hear on the other end. Dominic? Lily's voice was small, almost too quiet, as if she wasn't sure whether she should be making the call at all. But there was something in her tone that stopped him from hanging up. Something vulnerable. I need to talk to you. About something important. Dominic's heart twisted in his chest. There had been so many moments in the past when Lily had felt like his own flesh and blood. He had always felt a deep, unspoken connection to her, as if they were bound together by something beyond mere circumstance. And now, with the reality of her not being his daughter sinking in, he wasn't sure where that bond stood anymore. I'm listening, he said softly, trying to keep his voice steady. Lily paused before speaking again, her words coming out in a rush. I need to tell you something about my real father. The one I never talk about. The one Mom never talks about. I've known for a while now, Dominic. I've always known that there was more to the story. But now it feels like it's all coming together. And I don't know how to tell you, but I think you deserve to know. Dominic's pulse quickened. Her real father? The thought hung in the air, suffocating him, as he processed what she was saying. This wasn't just about Isabella's past anymore. This was about Lily, the girl he had loved like his own, the child he had spent years raising, and the secret she had been carrying all this time. What do you mean, Lily? His voice was rough, his stomach tightening with every passing second. What do you know? Lily's voice wavered as she continued. I overheard Mom talking to someone on the phone a few days ago. She doesn't know I heard, but I did. And she mentioned his name, Daniel. And I remember hearing it when I was younger, but she always got upset when I asked about him. I think he's the reason she's been so afraid of people finding out about me, about where I come from. Dominic's mind reeled. Daniel. The name was unfamiliar to him, but the way Lily said it, that was something he couldn't ignore. He could feel his chest tightening, his pulse pounding as the gravity of the situation settled in. Who is he, Lily? Dominic asked, struggling to keep his voice calm despite the storm raging inside him. What do you know about him? Lily hesitated, clearly reluctant to continue, but she pushed forward. I've seen pictures. I've seen the way Mom looks at them sometimes when she thinks I'm not paying attention. She hides them, but she can't hide the way she gets when she sees his face. There's something about him. Something dark. Dominic felt a chill run through him. He had spent years knowing Isabella, loving her, but even now he could sense the depth of the secrets she had hidden. Secrets that stretched far beyond what he had imagined. Something about Daniel. Something dark. I know you're probably angry at Mom for not telling you this. I am too sometimes, Lily said, her voice cracking. But I think you deserve to know who he is. I think it's time you find out the whole truth. I've always thought that if I just waited long enough, I could piece it all together. But now it feels like it's not just my story. It's yours too. Dominic's heart skipped a beat, the words sinking into his mind like stones. Lily wasn't just offering a revelation. She was offering a key to everything. This wasn't just about his wife's betrayal anymore. It was about the life they had all been living, the life built on a house of lies and half-truths. And now it was time to tear it all down. Lily, I need you to tell me everything you know, he said, his voice firm but filled with a desperation he couldn't quite hide. I need to know who Daniel is. I need to know the truth. All of it. Lily took a deep breath on the other end of the line, and for a moment, there was silence. When she spoke again, her voice was thick with emotion, but there was a sense of finality in her words. He's not just anyone, Dominic. He's dangerous. He's the reason my mother left everything behind. He's the reason she keeps all of us in hiding. He's the reason I've never had a chance to know my real family. And now he's coming for us. The weight of Lily's words crashed over him like a tidal wave, washing away the last remnants of the life he thought he knew. This wasn't just a family secret. This was something far darker, something that had been lingering in the shadows for years, threatening to tear everything apart. And now it was reaching out, pulling them all into its orbit. Dominic's mind spun, his thoughts racing faster than he could process. Lily's revelation hadn't just shattered everything. It had opened a door to an even greater mystery, one that could threaten more than just his marriage. It could threaten their very lives. Where is he now? Dominic asked, his voice tight with urgency. Where can we find him? Lily's response was quiet, almost a whisper. I don't know, but I think he's closer than we realize. And if he's coming for us, I don't know how much longer we have before it's too late. Dominic's blood ran cold. The real battle had only just begun, and now he was in it, dragged into a world of secrets, lies, and danger that would change everything he thought he knew about his family. Dominic's mind raced as he sat at the kitchen table, his hand gripping his coffee mug so tightly it felt like the only thing holding him together. Lily's words from the night before echoed in his head, each one more unsettling than the last. He had always believed his life was built on a solid foundation, success, wealth, love. But now, that foundation was crumbling before his eyes, and every new piece of information seemed to shatter his world further. He couldn't stop thinking about Daniel, the name that had surfaced like a ghost from Isabella's past. And the more he considered it, the more something gnawed at him, something he couldn't place. Isabella had always been so careful, so controlled. But how had she kept a secret this monumental from him for so long? Why had she kept Lily's real father hidden from him, from their family, and more importantly, from Lily herself? Dominic needed answers, but he didn't know where to turn next. His lawyer had made some progress on tracing the legal documents that Isabella had concealed, but it was clear that there was much more to this story than just paper trails and official records. This was a family secret, a deep wound that had been hidden for years. And now, Dominic was caught in the middle of it all, helpless to undo the past. As he walked through the sprawling halls of their home, the weight of everything pressing on him, his phone buzzed in his pocket. It was Isabella. He had expected it. After all, it had been a day since their last conversation, and the silence between them had been suffocating. But this wasn't a simple phone call. It was a desperate plea for him to come home, to talk to her, to try to understand. Dominic stood still for a moment, staring at the screen. The woman he had once trusted more than anyone, the woman he had vowed to spend his life with, had hidden an entire life from him. She had kept their daughter's past from him. She had kept his past from him. With a deep breath, he answered. I'm on my way, he said, his voice calm but firm, betraying none of the chaos swirling inside him. When he arrived at their home, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Isabella stood by the grand staircase, looking as composed as ever, but there was a fragility in her gaze, a wariness that Dominic had never seen before. She had always been so strong, so certain, but now, in the wake of everything that had come to light, she looked smaller, like the weight of the world was pressing down on her, too. She met his gaze as he entered, but it was clear that words were difficult for her. For the first time in their relationship, she seemed unsure of herself. Dominic didn't speak immediately. He didn't have the words. There was nothing he could say that would erase the betrayal he felt, nothing that could repair the years of secrecy. Isabella took a step forward, breaking the silence, her voice barely above a whisper. Dominic, I know I've hurt you. I know I've kept things from you. But there's more to this, more than I've ever told you. And I never wanted to keep it from you. Not really. Dominic's heart tightened. Then why did you? he asked, his voice more raw than he intended. Why did you keep Lily's real father from me? From us? What could be so dangerous that you had to keep it a secret for all these years? Isabella's face faltered, her eyes flickering with a pain he had never seen before. She hesitated before speaking, as though weighing whether she could trust him with the rest of the truth. Daniel isn't just a name from the past, Dominic, she said quietly. He's connected to a lot of things. Things that go beyond just our family. He's not someone I ever wanted you to know about because he's dangerous. He's part of a world I never wanted you to be a part of. Dominic felt a surge of frustration, but he forced himself to remain calm. What world? What are you talking about? Isabella swallowed hard, her breath shallow. He's not just a random man from my past. Daniel was involved in some very dangerous things. Criminal things. I tried to leave it behind when I met you, but when I got pregnant with Lily, everything changed. I had to make choices to protect her, to protect us. That's why I kept her hidden. That's why I kept everything hidden. I didn't want you to be dragged into this. Dominic stared at her, trying to digest her words. His mind was spinning with the implications of what she was saying. Criminal things? His wife, the woman he had trusted with everything, had been involved with someone dangerous, someone connected to a world that was far from the life they had built together. He wanted to scream, to demand answers, but something in her eyes, something raw and vulnerable, stopped him. I thought I could protect you both. I thought I could build a new life for us away from all of it. But it's clear now that I was wrong, she continued, her voice breaking. I didn't just hide Lily's father from you. I've been hiding from my past too, trying to protect all of us. But now that Daniel's back, it's all unraveling. Dominic felt a sinking feeling in his stomach. Back, he repeated. You mean he's here in town? He's been looking for you? Isabella nodded slowly, her face pale. I think he's been following us for a while. He knows about Lily, and now he wants to make sure he has control over her. Over all of us. Dominic felt a cold dread settle over him. The truth was slowly coming into focus, but the reality of it was harder to grasp. Isabella had been hiding from Daniel for years, but now he was back, and he wasn't going to stop until he had whatever it was he was after. I can't let him hurt you, Dominic said, his voice low and intense. I won't let him hurt Lily either. I've been trying to protect you both, Isabella repeated, her voice trembling. But I don't know if I can anymore. I don't know how much longer we can stay hidden from him. Dominic took a deep breath, his mind racing. The danger was real. Isabella's past wasn't just a hidden chapter. It was a looming threat, one that could destroy everything they had worked for. His entire life, the perfect life he had believed in, was built on secrets. And now, those secrets were coming for them. But he wasn't going to stand by and let it all slip away. He reached out and took Isabella's hand, his grip firm but reassuring. We'll face this together, he said, his voice steady. We'll find a way to protect Lily, to protect each other. We don't have to hide anymore. Isabella nodded, the relief in her eyes clear. But there was still fear there too. Fear of what was coming, of what she had kept hidden for so long. Dominic's resolve hardened. He had always thought of himself as a man of action, someone who could handle anything life threw at him. But this wasn't just a business deal gone wrong or a financial crisis. It was a threat to his family, to the life he had tried so hard to build. And he was ready to do whatever it took to protect them from the storm that was coming. Dominic stood in the living room, staring at the front door, his mind consumed by everything that had led him to this moment. The silence in the house was deafening. Isabella had left hours ago, her expression heavy with guilt and fear as she'd gone to try and make peace with Lily. Dominic didn't know where to begin. He didn't know how to piece together the broken fragments of trust that had once held his life together. It had only been a few days since everything came crashing down. A whirlwind of secrets, lies, and revelations had turned his world upside down. Daniel was real, and worse, he was still a threat. Isabella's past wasn't something she had left behind. It was alive, lingering in the shadows of their lives, and now it was coming for them. Dominic's thoughts were interrupted by the sudden ring of the doorbell. His heart leaped, the adrenaline surging in his veins. He knew it had to be him, Daniel. He didn't know how the man had found them, but there was no other explanation. Isabella had warned him, but Dominic hadn't been prepared for how quickly things would escalate. He had no more time to waste. Taking a deep breath, Dominic moved toward the door. He could feel the tension building, the raw energy in the air thick with impending danger. He wasn't sure what was waiting on the other side, but he knew he had to face it. He couldn't let Isabella and Lily face this alone. He opened the door. Standing in front of him was a man in his mid-40s, tall, well-dressed, and exuding an air of quiet menace. There was no warmth in his gaze, no pretense of civility. He was exactly as Isabella had described him, dangerous. The kind of man who took what he wanted, regardless of the consequences. Daniel's eyes flickered to Dominic's face, assessing him with a cold, detached precision. Well, Daniel said, his voice smooth but carrying a weight of authority. Dominic Whitmore, the man who thinks he can protect everything. Funny, isn't it? All the money, all the power, and yet you can't even protect your own family from the past. Dominic's jaw tightened. He didn't flinch, didn't let his fears show. He wasn't going to give Daniel the satisfaction of seeing him rattle. I don't know what you think you're doing here, Dominic said, his voice steady but with a simmering edge. But I'm not going to let you tear apart my family. Whatever you think you're owed, whatever power you think you have, you're not getting it from us. Daniel let out a low chuckle, his eyes glinting with amusement. You think you can just protect them from me? From what's been waiting in the shadows all these years? You've no idea what you're up against, Whitmore. Your wife tried to escape this world, but you can't escape your blood. And now, you're all tangled up in it, whether you like it or not. Dominic felt a rush of anger. It was true that his world had been shattered, but Daniel's attempts to manipulate him were not going to work. He wasn't going to back down. Don't talk to me about blood, Dominic spat. You're the one who disappeared. You're the one who left them behind. I may not know all the details of your history with Isabella, but I'm damn sure not going to let you drag her, or my daughter, into whatever dark hole you crawled out of. Daniel's expression hardened. You're delusional if you think you can keep her from me. Isabella made her choice years ago, but she knows. She knows what's at stake. And so do you. There's nothing you can do to stop me. For a moment, the silence stretched between them. Dominic's mind was working rapidly. The man in front of him was dangerous, manipulative, and he was going to stop at nothing to get what he wanted. But Dominic wasn't going to let fear control him. He couldn't. Not when everything he cared about was at risk. Listen to me, Dominic said, his voice low, but with an intensity that cut through the tension. You're not going to hurt my family. Whatever the hell you think you're entitled to, whether it's money, revenge, or control, I'm not giving you that. And if you think you can threaten me into submission, you've seriously underestimated who I am. Daniel raised an eyebrow, as though intrigued. You've got more fight in you than I gave you credit for. But this isn't about you, Whitmore. It's about what's rightfully mine. Isabella and Lily, they don't belong to you. They never did. I'm here to remind them of that. Dominic took a step forward, his eyes locking onto Daniel's with unwavering determination. You don't get to decide who belongs to who. You walked away from them. You gave up your right to be part of their lives. Now, all you're doing is threatening them, and I'm not going to let that happen. If you want to go down this road, fine, but you should know something. I will protect them. I will destroy you if it means keeping them safe. For the first time, Daniel's facade cracked. There was a brief flicker of something in his eyes, something that almost looked like doubt. But just as quickly, he masked it again, hiding behind that cold, arrogant exterior. You'll regret this, Whitmore, Daniel said, his voice hardening. You can't stop me. No matter how hard you try, you'll lose. Dominic didn't flinch. Try me? Without another word, Daniel turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing down the hallway. Dominic stood there for a moment, his fists clenched at his sides, the weight of the confrontation still pressing on his chest. The immediate danger was gone, but Dominic knew this was far from over. Daniel was not the kind of man to let things go so easily. But Dominic was equally determined. This wasn't just about protecting Isabella or Lily anymore. It was about standing up to a threat that had been looming in their lives for far too long, and proving that nothing would tear their family apart. As he closed the door behind him, Dominic took a long, steadying breath. The battle had just begun, but he would fight no matter the cost, because some things were worth fighting for, and his family, his future, was worth everything. Before moving forward, do not forget to subscribe and share. Now, coming back, Dominic sat in the dimly lit study, his hands pressed firmly against the edge of the desk. The weight of the last few days bore down on him like an unrelenting storm. He could feel the sting of betrayal still lingering, the sharp edge of each new revelation cutting deeper into him. Daniel's threats, his cold detachment, had rattled something inside him, something he hadn't anticipated. The silence in the house was unnerving. It was a silence that no longer felt peaceful. Every room in the mansion seemed to echo with the ghosts of secrets past, of things that should have been said long ago. His mind raced, not knowing where to go next. Isabella, despite her attempt to protect Lily, was now caught between two worlds. One where her past would forever haunt her, and one where she was trying to rebuild something with Dominic. It was a dangerous balance, one that couldn't be maintained forever. But what would he do? What would anyone do in his shoes? He thought of Lily, the girl who had been unknowingly thrust into this war of legacies and lies. She was the only thing that truly mattered. His heart ached for her, for the life she'd been forced to live without knowing the truth, for the innocence she had lost when her world had been shattered by the revelation of her biological father. How could he keep her safe from a man like Daniel, someone who wielded control like a weapon? The thought of Isabella, standing at the edge of the abyss, only made the decision harder. She had chosen to protect her daughter above all else, hiding the truth from him to shield them both from the consequences of Daniel's presence in their lives. Her love for him had always been clear, but the depth of the secret she had carried for 10 years was something he had never fully understood. The more Dominic reflected, the clearer it became. The truth was far uglier than he had ever imagined. The life he had built, the family they had created, was built on a fragile foundation of secrets. But now it was time to tear down those walls. It was time to face the truth, no matter how painful. Dominic's thoughts were interrupted by the soft creak of the door opening behind him. Isabella stepped into the room, her silhouette framed by the faint light filtering through the curtains. She didn't speak at first, simply standing there, watching him. There was something in her expression, vulnerability mixed with determination, that mirrored his own inner turmoil. "You're still awake," she said quietly, her voice tinged with a sadness that made Dominic's chest tighten. "I can't sleep," he replied, his words heavy with exhaustion. "Too much to think about." Isabella nodded, taking a few slow steps forward until she was just a few feet away. She didn't sit down, didn't touch him. She simply stood there, as though waiting for him to speak, to make some kind of decision. He could feel the distance between them, the invisible divide that had only grown wider with each passing hour. "Dominic," she began softly, her voice barely above a whisper, "I never wanted any of this. I never wanted to bring this kind of danger into our lives. You have to understand that. I've kept so much from you because I thought I was protecting you. I thought I was protecting Lily." He turned in his chair to face her, his gaze sharp but filled with sadness. "I know you were trying to protect us, but all of this, it's too much. You can't keep running from it. You can't hide it forever. The truth has a way of coming out, no matter how hard you try to bury it." Isabella's eyes filled with tears, but she held herself together. "I thought if I kept it hidden, if I kept everything from you, maybe you'd never have to know. Maybe you'd never have to face the man who wants to destroy everything we have." Dominic stood up abruptly, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. "And now you've put us all in danger." "Daniel is dangerous, Isabella. He doesn't care about who gets hurt as long as he gets what he wants." She flinched at his words, but didn't back down. "I know, and I don't know how to fix it. I've made so many mistakes, Dominic. I've let him control me for too long." The vulnerability in her voice cracked through Dominic's hardened exterior, and for a brief moment, he felt the walls between them start to crumble. But the reality of the situation hit him hard, and he had to focus. He couldn't afford to get lost in the emotion of it all. Not now. He took a slow, steadying breath, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know if I can forgive you for what you've done, Isabella. I don't know if I can trust you again. But I do know one thing. We can't let Daniel win. I won't let him take my family from me. Isabella's eyes widened, as though surprised by his words, but there was a flicker of hope in them too. What are you saying? Dominic turned toward the window, looking out at the darkened skyline. His mind was made up, but the decision wasn't going to be easy. I'm saying we need to fight back. I won't let him take Lily. I won't let him tear us apart. We need to take control of this situation, Isabella. We need to expose him, to take away whatever power he thinks he has over us. Isabella stepped closer, her voice breaking through the tension. But how? How do we fight someone like him? Dominic turned back to face her, determination hardening in his eyes. We start by finding out everything we can about him. Every dirty secret, every weak link. I've got the resources, Isabella. We can destroy him if we do it the right way. But we need to be careful. We can't let him get the upper hand. Isabella nodded, her face pale but resolute. We'll do whatever it takes. I'll do whatever it takes to protect Lily and to make sure Daniel can never hurt us again. Dominic reached out and took her hand, squeezing it tightly. He didn't know what the next days would bring, but one thing was clear. He was done being passive. He was done letting fear control his life. The war had begun, and he was going to fight until the very end. Then it's settled, he said, his voice steady, his gaze unwavering. We take back control. We fight for our family. In that moment, Dominic made the hardest decision of his life. It was a decision that would change everything, for better or worse. But he wasn't going to lose. Not now. Not ever. The morning light filtered in through the large windows of the study, casting soft golden hues across the polished oak desk where Dominic sat, surrounded by stacks of files, old family documents, and papers that seemed to weigh more heavily on his mind than the physical burden they presented. The sense of unease that had gnawed at him since his conversation with Isabella hadn't let up. If anything, it had only intensified. The more he learned, the more he realized how deeply entangled his family was in this tangled web of lies, secrets, and unspoken history. Dominic's mind raced as he sifted through the papers. His eyes kept drifting back to the family portrait at the far side of the desk, the one of him, Isabella, and Lily, taken just a few years ago. A time when everything had seemed so perfect, so serene. The image that now felt like an illusion. The smile on Isabella's face had once been genuine, but now Dominic couldn't help but see the mask she had worn all these years. There was so much she had hidden from him, so much that, if he were being honest, he was still struggling to accept. The phone on his desk buzzed, breaking his reverie. He glanced at the caller ID and saw Isabella's name flash across the screen. His stomach tightened. It had been hours since their last conversation, and in those hours, his thoughts had only grown darker. The distance between them, emotional and physical, was growing, but Dominic knew he couldn't back down now. Too much was at stake. He answered the call, trying to keep his voice steady. Isabella, Dominic, she said, her tone wavering slightly. I think I found something. Something about Daniel. His pulse quickened. What is it? I've been going through some old papers, records. I found something. It's a letter from my father to Daniel. Her voice broke, and Dominic could hear her taking a shaky breath. I didn't want to believe it, but I think Daniel's been planning this for a long time. Longer than I even realized. Dominic leaned forward, his mind sharpening with the promise of answers. What does the letter say? What's in it? Isabella hesitated, as though weighing whether or not to share more. But then she spoke, her voice tight. It's from a time before Lily was born. Before I even met you, Dominic. It's a confession. My father, he knew about Daniel. He knew he was a threat, but he did nothing to stop him. In fact, he may have even helped him. The words hit Dominic like a punch to the gut. What do you mean? Why would your father help someone like Daniel? I don't know, Isabella replied, her voice tinged with disbelief. But it's clear. The letter says Daniel was supposed to inherit the family fortune. My father was grooming him to take over everything. Our company, our legacy, everything. Dominic sat back in his chair, his hand gripping the edge of the desk for support. This was worse than he had imagined. Isabella's father, a man he had once respected, had knowingly put his family at risk by allowing Daniel to worm his way into their lives, all while pretending to be a protector. Dominic could feel the walls closing in as the truth began to take shape. The conspiracy was deeper than he could have ever imagined. "Do you still have the letter?" he asked, trying to steady his breathing. "Yes, I've got it here," Isabella answered. "But that's not all. The letter also talks about a deal, a secret agreement. My father, he was arranging for Daniel to take control of the family business after his death, and he wanted me to stay out of the way. He wanted me to marry someone else, someone who wouldn't interfere with the plan." Dominic's blood ran cold. The idea that Isabella's father, the man who had given her the life she had known, had manipulated her in such a profound way was incomprehensible. But it was all beginning to make sense. The lies, the secrecy, the reason why Isabella had been so reluctant to talk about her family's past, why she had tried so hard to shield Lily from any of it. "Did your father know about Lily?" Dominic asked, his voice low. Isabella's voice wavered. "I think he did. I think he knew she existed. But that was part of the deal. He wanted Daniel to have me all to himself. And Lily, she was never supposed to be a part of the picture. That's why Daniel has been so obsessed with her. He doesn't just want me back. He wants everything that was promised to him." The pieces were falling into place with horrifying clarity. Daniel wasn't just trying to reclaim what he thought was owed to him. He was trying to reclaim a future that had been denied to him, a future that had been stolen by Isabella's refusal to follow the path her father had set for her. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about power, control over the family legacy that Daniel believed was rightfully his. Dominic stood up abruptly, his mind racing. "We need to go public with this. Isabella, we can't let him continue to play this game. He's too dangerous." Isabella was quiet for a moment. "I know," she finally said, her voice small but determined. "But it's not just about going public anymore, Dominic. We need to go further. This is going to tear the entire family apart. It will ruin everything." He knew what she meant. The deeper they dug, the more everything would unravel. The foundation of their entire family, the legacy that had been built on years of power and money, would come crashing down around them. The secret deals, the hidden truths, the webs of manipulation, everything that had been buried for so long would be exposed. And it would change everything, not just for them, but for everyone involved. Dominic paused, feeling the weight of the decision before him. There was no turning back now. "We don't have a choice, Isabella. This isn't just about protecting our family anymore. It's about making sure that this legacy, your father's legacy, doesn't destroy us. We need to end this, once and for all." The air between them was thick with unspoken fear and determination. They both knew the stakes were higher than ever. The discovery of the letter had opened a door, one that could not be closed. The truth was out there, and with it, the power to destroy the lives they had worked so hard to build. But as Dominic stared at the piles of documents, the weight of the family legacy pressing on him, he realized that the fight wasn't just for survival. It was for the future. For the future he wanted to build with Isabella and Lily, free from the ghosts of the past. They were standing on the edge of a precipice. It was time to jump. Dominic stood at the window, staring out over the sprawling grounds of the mansion, his mind a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. The truth about his family was now in the open, each revelation more earth-shattering than the last. The letter from Isabella's father had opened a Pandora's box of dark secrets, and now it was clear that Daniel's reach went far deeper than anyone could have imagined. What had begun as a personal betrayal had evolved into something far more dangerous, a battle for control of everything Dominic had built. But as he looked at the rolling hills beyond the estate, the unease that had been creeping in for weeks shifted. There was something more, something that he hadn't seen coming. His phone buzzed on the desk, snapping him out of his trance. He picked it up without looking at the screen, his hand moving mechanically as he answered. "Dominic, it's done." Isabella's voice came through, calm, but with an undercurrent of something darker, something final. "We have everything. The documents, the proof, it's all there." Dominic's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean, everything?" I mean everything," Isabella interrupted, her voice firm. "The evidence, the agreements, the deals your father made with Daniel, there's more. So much more. It's not just the family business. It's everything. All of it was orchestrated, right down to the minute details. Dominic's chest tightened. What else did he plan? Not just the business, Dominic, Isabella continued. Daniel wasn't just after the company. He wanted your inheritance. He wanted your legacy, the one your father promised him. But there's something else, something I didn't realize until I saw it. The documents aren't just about power or control. They're about blood. Dominic's mind raced, his stomach churning with the implications. Blood? What are you talking about? Isabella paused for a moment, and when she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. Dominic, you're not who you think you are. The words hit him like a punch to the gut. His pulse quickened, his breath shallow. What? What do you mean? You're not your father's son. Not biologically, Isabella said, her words piercing through the fog of confusion and disbelief. You're adopted, Dominic. Your father never told you. Daniel, he's your half-brother. Dominic's knees almost buckled beneath him. The air felt thick, as if the weight of 1,000 years of lies and deceit had just crashed down on him. His mind spun, and for a moment, the room seemed to close in around him. He gripped the edge of the desk for support, trying to make sense of what Isabella had just revealed. He wasn't his father's son? He wasn't even related to the family he'd spent his entire life with? It didn't make sense. None of it did. No, Dominic's voice was shaky, the words almost too difficult to process. That's impossible. My father. He would never. Isabella's voice softened, but the gravity of what she was saying didn't lessen. I'm sorry, Dominic, but it's true. It's all on the papers. Your father had you adopted when you were just a child. He was trying to protect you from something he didn't want you to know about. Something about your biological family. Dominic's thoughts collided, his heart pounding in his chest as he stumbled backward, trying to catch his breath. The room felt colder now, and yet his skin burned as though every nerve in his body was on fire. Was he the product of some kind of scheme? A pawn in a game he hadn't even known he was playing? So Daniel, his voice broke, the words catching in his throat. He's my brother? My half-brother? Isabella let out a soft sigh. Yes, and that's why he's been obsessed with you. It's why he's been trying to destroy everything you've built. Because he feels entitled to your life, to the legacy that was never his. He believes that, by blood, everything that's yours is actually his. Dominic ran his hands through his hair, his mind reeling. His entire life had been a lie. The family he had trusted, the name he had carried, none of it was his by blood. He was a stranger to himself. And Daniel? His whole life was a series of betrayals, every move designed to claim what Dominic had, to tear it all down because he was too blinded by his entitlement to see what was in front of him. What now? Dominic finally asked, his voice strained but steadying. What do we do with this? With him? I don't know yet, Isabella replied, her tone uncertain. But we can't let him win. We can't let him use this against us. If he knew about your adoption, he would have made his move already. He doesn't know we have these documents yet. He doesn't know we're on to him. Dominic's mind raced through 1,000 different scenarios. What could he do with this information? How could he even begin to process everything he had just learned? His identity, everything about who he was now shattered. But there was one thing that hadn't changed. One thing he could hold on to. I'm not going to let him take this from me, Dominic said, his voice gaining strength as the resolve began to form in his chest. Not my life. Not my family. I won't let him win. Isabella was silent for a moment. Before she spoke again, her words a bit more resigned. But you don't know the full picture, Dominic. The adoption wasn't the only secret your father kept. There's more, something else he was hiding, something even darker. The truth about your real parents. It's all in the files. Dominic closed his eyes, feeling his breath catch in his throat. His real parents. What had his father been hiding from him all these years? And why? What had been so dangerous that he'd had to shield him from the truth? The world felt like it was crumbling around him. And yet, through it all, one thing became clear. The fight was only beginning. And this time, it wasn't just about his inheritance or the family business. It was about reclaiming his life. About digging into the truth that had been buried so deeply, it threatened to consume everything in its path. Dominic knew what he had to do next. He had to face the past, his past, and confront the truth that had been hidden from him for so long. Only then could he put an end to the nightmare that Daniel had woven. Only then could he find a way to finally take control of his own legacy. But as the weight of his father's secrets threatened to suffocate him, Dominic couldn't shake the feeling that there was still one final twist waiting for him. And when that twist came, it would change everything. Before moving forward, do not forget to subscribe and share. Now, coming back, Dominic sat in his study, the final remnants of the day's light filtering through the curtains. The chaos of the last few weeks had settled into something quieter, but no less overwhelming. His life, his world, everything had been turned upside down, and yet here he was surrounded by the remnants of it all. The papers on his desk, the documents that had once held so much power over him, now seemed like little more than ink on paper. The secrets, the betrayals, they no longer held the same weight they once had. It was almost as if he had shed his old self, the person he thought he was, and emerged as someone new. He leaned back in his chair, his fingers running along the edge of the desk. The mansion, once a symbol of his success, felt different now. It was no longer a fortress protecting him from the world. It was simply a place, a physical structure. The real change had occurred within him, and that was where the battle had truly been fought. And now, for the first time in a long while, Dominic felt a sense of clarity. The last few months had been a blur. He had uncovered secrets that shattered his understanding of everything. His family's lies, his father's betrayal, Daniel's role in it all. But even amidst the unraveling of his legacy, something had shifted inside him. There was still so much he had to process, so much that remained unresolved. But there was a peace now that he hadn't felt before. The anger, the confusion, the sense of helplessness, those had all faded, leaving room for something far more empowering. Dominic had spent countless nights combing through the papers Isabella had provided, piecing together the fragments of his past. The truth about his adoption, the lies his father had built his life on, and the deep connection between Daniel and his real family. Everything had been laid bare. But through all of it, Dominic realized that while his father had made choices for him, he was the one who ultimately held the power to shape his future. The day Daniel had made his move, trying to claim what he believed was his, had been the breaking point. The fight for control had become a battle for something much more personal. It wasn't just about the business or the inheritance anymore. It was about reclaiming his identity, his autonomy, and his right to choose his own path. And so, Dominic had made a decision. He had gone to the board meeting, stood in front of the company's key stakeholders, and announced his plans to restructure everything. He was taking control, not only of the company, but of his life. He was pushing Daniel out, not with force or aggression, but with a quiet confidence that only someone who had been through the fire could possess. There would be no more secrets, no more hidden agendas, but even more than that, Dominic had decided to sever the ties that had bound him to the man who had once been his father. The adoption, the lies, it all made sense now. His real parents, whoever they were, had been kept from him for his entire life. But no matter how much he wanted answers, he knew one thing for sure. His future wasn't tied to the mistakes of the past. His future was his own to create. The door to his study creaked open, and Isabella stepped inside, a quiet but confident presence. She had been by his side through all of it, guiding him when he was too lost to find his way, supporting him when he needed it the most. And now, as he looked at her, Dominic felt a wave of gratitude and something more, something he hadn't quite put into words until now. She smiled, and for the first time in a long while, Dominic felt a genuine connection to the world around him. "You did it," she said softly, her voice warm. "You found your way through the chaos." Dominic nodded, his gaze drifting toward the window. "I had to," he said quietly. "It wasn't just about the business or the legacy. It was about me, about reclaiming my life." Isabella's smile deepened. "And what now?" Dominic looked at her, his heart beating a little faster. "Now we build something new, something that's truly ours." For the first time in his life, Dominic didn't feel like he was living in someone else's shadow. He wasn't trying to live up to expectations that had been set for him before he had even had a chance to understand who he truly was. He wasn't playing a part in a drama scripted by others. He was finally stepping into his own, and it was liberating. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said," Isabella continued, "about creating something new, something from scratch. You've got the skills, the vision, and now the freedom. You could do anything you want. Dominic turned to face her fully, feeling the weight of her words sink in. She was right. All of the pieces of his life were scattered around him. His wealth, his connections, his intelligence. But now, they could be shaped into something entirely different. Something better. He didn't need to hold on to the past anymore. He could let it go and move forward with purpose. I've been so focused on the idea of legacy, Dominic said, his voice a little rough with emotion. But I think I was looking at it all wrong. Legacy isn't about holding on to what others have built. It's about creating something meaningful, something that lasts because it matters. Isabella's eyes softened. Exactly. A silence settled between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was filled with possibilities, with the knowledge that whatever had come before, it no longer defined him. Dominic had the chance to define himself. The next few months passed in a blur of activity. Dominic restructured the company not just as a business, but as an extension of his own values. He focused on philanthropy, on making real changes in the communities his wealth touched. He invested in education, healthcare, and sustainability. He built new partnerships, ones based on trust, on honesty. And slowly but surely, he found himself creating a new legacy, one built from the ground up, with no secrets to haunt it. And through it all, Isabella remained by his side. They became partners in every sense of the word, not just in business, but in life. Their bond deepened, and the connection that had started with a shared struggle now blossomed into something much more, something neither of them had expected. As Dominic stood at the head of a new company meeting, looking at the faces of those who had once doubted him, he realized that he had found something even more valuable than wealth or power. He had found peace, and he had found a way to shape his future, free from the lies that had once chained him to a past he couldn't escape. The mansion, the family legacy, and everything he had once thought defined him, all of it had been just a shadow. But now, Dominic understood, the only thing that truly mattered was the life he was living, the life he was building. And that, he realized with a sense of clarity he had never felt before, was enough. He smiled at Isabella, a look of understanding passing between them. Together, they had turned the page. A new chapter had begun, one where the past was nothing more than a distant memory, and the future was waiting, full of promise. And for the first time in his life, Dominic was ready to step into it fully. I know you guys have already subscribed till now, but if you have not, do like, share, and subscribe.